first major test for the opposition leader's truce with the President Ruto. Cheptumo, this is a Senator Baringo who passed on yesterday, was eulogized as a man who really, worked well for the county of Baringo. He was eulogized by the President, by the Senate Speaker, and by his colleagues and family members. Read that story in the second page of The Nation. And then former lovers fight over child's baptism. Okay, this should be an interesting one. Bid to bar grandparents from interfering with child's affairs rejected. A court has declined a man's request to order his estranged wife to allow the baptism of their 7-year-old daughter according to his faith. The man who also wanted the court to bar his former parents-in-law from interfering with the minor's affairs and influencing her upbringing. That's not possible. Ruto and Raila truce face acid tests. Raila AUC loss a blessing in disguise, says Gachagwa's allies. The back page of The Nation, we are on track to retain our title, says Gor Mahia. And then we check the standards. Ruto's blunders, President Ruto's diplomatic misstep on regional conflicts and global alliances may have cost Raila Odinga the AUC chairmanship. Analysts cite his stance on the DRC crisis, Israel-Gaza war, and failure to mobilize key African blocs as key setbacks. Raila considered defeat, vowing to continue serving Africa in other capacities. And then the Dusit attack. You remember the Dusit terror attack? Well, it marks today its anniversary. And then there's an inside story on how it took 1 year. 1 year in the planning. Very interesting story, I must say. It says, hiding in plain sight, terrorists are wedding and the unfolding of the Dusit 2 attack. Addis race, Raila concedes defeat but stands tall. The back page of the Standard, you have Kiplimo bags new world record in Barcelona. And then you have Tusker wobble as Gor go into hibernation. That's what the dailies say. In a couple of minutes or so, I will have two gentlemen with me here. I have George Ngaira and Moreithi Muito, who we're going to look at how the loss of the AUC chair is going to affect the Kenyan politics. All that coming up shortly.
You are watching EBN TV, transforming your world.
Welcome back to Morning Live. Now this morning, we're going to discuss something that is very important. and something that is definitely going to change the way the politics of the country are going to be played henceforth until 2027. We're talking about the African Union election, where our man Raila Odinga lost over the weekend. Now, it is said, I'm not going to say whether I support that or not, but it is said that President William Ruto would have loved so much to have Raila out of the local politics, because obviously Raila is what you call an enigma. Where he is, you can be very sure there's going to be a lot of fireworks. Let him come back. Let's see how this is going to play out. So in the studio, I have George Ngaira with me in the studio. Welcome, George.
Thank you very much.
And I have Mureide Muito.
Thank you very much for having me.
You know, I said in the studio, I have George Ngaira in the studio. My English teacher would have taken a shotgun and fired at me.
The good thing about it is that you're not English.
Interesting. Very. Had you expected this to happen, George?
Fred, first of all, I'd like to congratulate President William Ruto to some extent for the massive effort he put in place to try and really sell the candidature of Raila Odinga. You could tell that they had invested quite a lot of resources. I doubt if you go online, you can see any of, in terms of optics, of what the winner of this race actually put in terms of effort. He wasn't really everywhere.
Yes.
You couldn't visibly see him with the heads of states. In the manner and style in which President William Ruto tried to ensure that he exposes Raila Odinga to the people that really matter. And that's why in most of his foreign trips, you realize that Raila Odinga was part of his delegation most times.
Yeah, true.
And it was an effort to try and make sure that a Kenyan in this context, because that's how we perceived him as a Kenyan candidate, to be able to achieve that fate that would have been a strategic point for the country as far as the African matters are concerned. And also that visibility that then the country gets in other international engagements. But be it as it may, things went as they went, and the African leaders made their choice. And the reasons could be very many, but I truly believe that at some point we had to have a winner or a loser. Yeah.
Mureide?
Well, I think Kenya being represented in that platform was a noble thing. And in this case, the second time, because remember we had Amina Mohammed trying it out.
Yes.
And this is a political position, and politics are dynamic, and the dynamics of politics sometimes come into play. And today we might say that the Muslim factor played a big role in tilting, the favors of the votes for Raila Odinga, or turned it against Raila Odinga. But you see, when you look at Dr. Amina Mohammed as a Muslim, again, had it been her today, maybe it would have been different. But I think what I'm trying to say is that, you see, that time they had their own different reasons why they were looking at it. Today, we have the Muslim factor, which we have been talking about. If the Madagascar guy has actually withdrawn, since he withdrew from the race or dropped out from the race, being a majority Muslim, and also other countries like Comoros, which are their neighbors, and Seychelles and the like, you wouldn't expect anything different. SADC has got its inclination right now with the Middle East to a certain extent, and these are the kind of things that came into play. Also, Africa having its commitment economically to countries like China also would actually feature, owed to the fact that Kenya had actually gone the Western way, which we were actually running away from. Now, coming now into the politics and trying to analyze.
Were you surprised by the loss?
No, I wasn't. If you remember what I said.
Ngaira, were you surprised by the loss?
I was fairly surprised, based on the efforts that actually were put. If you compare to the other candidates, I think he was the most promoted.
He had put in a lot of effort.
I was coming back to local.
Yes.
In explaining what I was alluding to. His Excellency, the President William Ruto, has got a political formation that needed also to be strengthened, and that would grant him an assurance for 2027. Mm-hmm. And having started the coalition, the relationship with the ODM, and in this case Raila Odinga, and obtained the expertise that he obtained from the expatriates, that were hired to help him govern from ODM. Mm-hmm. Definitely it would have worked as a boost, and it did work as a boost, because you saw how it came into play even in the impeachment process. That politics for another moment, but it also came into play. But now, with what was coming up, having won that bit of ODM to himself, as a strategist, he would have wished to have the whole of Raila Odinga's support, and Raila Odinga himself behind him to support him. But he knew too well that it would have been too hard for him to support Raila Odinga while he's still in Kenya. Mm-hmm. Because as we know, Raila Odinga is definitely somebody who is very flexible. He can move in whichever direction. He can tilt even the national politics and take it to a different, give it a different dimension, which is what is expected even currently, right now, after he comes back. Mm-hmm. Now, William Ruto would have had it easier presenting Raila Odinga as a winner to Nyanza. And Raila Odinga would have been easy for Raila Odinga to declare. You're saying now supporting that he supported me.
It would have been a triumphant entry.
Yes.
Him on top of the vehicles.
Absolutely.
And it takes Raila Odinga to Luo Nyanza and says,
my brother Ruto.
Yes.
And that is what would have been. It's a strategy that you draw earlier, before. Once, if this goes this way, this is what we'll do. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't go that way, then this is how we will do it. Let me tell you, where the politics are, he's waiting to see which direction the politics of Azimio and ODM in that sense is going to take, with Raila Odinga having settled and the AU dust has settled. Mm-hmm. Raila Odinga will have to make a decision on how he's going to pursue the 2027 vote. Remember, a declaration had already been made by his brother. That's how possible that you digest that, Oburu Odinga, and the Secretary General of the party, that they're going to fill their own candidate. Mm-hmm. This is not their own making. They must have sat down, and Raila Odinga knows that. Mm-hmm. And these are things that are going to...
So Raila is going to, from your perspective, is going to be on the ballot?
Raila...
2027.
Analyzing the character of Raila Odinga and his desire to rule the country, I believe Raila Odinga is going to be part of the ballot.
Gaira, you say you were surprised by the loss.
Yeah.
Yes.
Once again, based on just the kind of effort that was put in place to try and see him win the seat, you realize that even when I tried to look at what activities the other candidates have been doing towards this vote, and I can tell you there's very little you would get about those two other contestants. But on the Raila side, you'd see him in so many platforms here and abroad with presidents in Europe when this president traveled to international engagements, he was always tagging along with Raila Odinga. So the level of visibility that he had was just way too much compared to the other candidates. And being that it's only the presidents who are voting, it's not like you're going for a public vote. Surely 48 people you can even have on a WhatsApp group. It's not something you don't really even need to travel. Fred, you can make. One time I had Mheshimiwa Mau for my MP for Kilome saying that sometimes he'd go to his office and find he has over 900 missed calls. And so he was saying, if I was to go back and do a callback for each one of them, and most of them are usually people that ask him for something. So he always spends not less than 5 minutes every time he speaks a call. Then he would need almost 4,500 minutes to respond, and he said it's not practical. You understand? But 48, you can do 48 calls and probably just do it in an hour. You understand? So the kind of efforts that had been put in place to really promote him, and also looking at his stature, most of these presidents are his personal friends, Tshisekedi and Ramaphosa, and like the other two gentlemen who are just ministers, just like our former minister, Amina Mohammed, just a minister within government. So they wouldn't rival him in terms of stature. And I even saw in the debate, the previous debate just before they went now for the vote, even the winner of this race said that in terms of stature, he believes Raila Odinga has the enough kind of experience that is needed for that particular institution. So he acknowledged it even himself. So based on that, I really didn't believe that the other ministers had a chance. But you see, Fred, even as you go into vote, countries come in with the interest as to how they would love to see their interests covered at the continental level.
Yes.
And that's where now the dynamics of what he's saying about the Muslim nations, the SADC countries now. Remember, people forget Madagascar is part of the SADC group.
Yes.
And they had a candidate. And these are 16 countries that actually had a candidate on the ballot. It's not like they went there with no candidate. They had a candidate that they'd chosen. And also you have the Francophone countries, and where you saw President William Ruto. You know, most of these Francophone countries, Fred, looking at the history they've had, particularly with France and the kind of exploitation that has been there, are truly trying to drive away from France and the relations with France.
Yes.
And so when you see President William Ruto again picking his phone and calling President Macron, telling him to play a role in what is happening in Congo, it's really not what the Francophone countries would want to do. Most of them are really walking away from France.
Most of them actually
are walking away from France.
Yes. You have the Burkina Faso, the Gabon, the Niger.
They really do not want to have anything to do with France because of the kind of role that France has played in terms of exploitation of their resources and manipulation of their corrupt leaders in those regions. That's why you have the cases of the blood diamonds of Sierra Leone, where you have these white people bringing in funding that goes into buying arms because those people do not manufacture arms. When you look at what is happening in Eastern Congo, those Tutsis that you are seeing there who are part of the M23 rebels, they do not own any gun factory. Yes. But they are fully armed.
Yes, they're very well armed.
Very armed. It's because there's somebody else who's actually bringing the weapons to them. You understand? So when you have such a critical, and Fred, I saw almost 2,000-3,000 people dying almost the last 2 weeks. It's unfortunate what is happening in Eastern Congo, and it's something that for sure had a role in as far as the voting is concerned, because of the not just the pleas from President Tshisekedi to the SADC countries. But also you had South African soldiers who were actually killed in part of this. So South Africa is a wounded animal in that race. Never mind Cyril Ramaphosa is a personal friend to Raila Odinga. So all this come into play, then changes the dynamics, because these are human beings, Fred, they're not robots, and they're seated there and they're voting in real time. And when you look at the split vote, how it was in the first and the second vote, you'd realize that the SADC countries actually voted for their candidate. But when now he was kicked out not as a top two, then they had to make a second choice. And I'm sure then at that point, as they were doing that, a few other things came into play, and I think Raila Odinga could read the mood. That's why when he came to the fourth, fifth round, he realized I might not be able to secure a certain bunch of votes, and just to save face decides to walk out, which is very unfortunate.
So SADC, the Muslim nation, the Francophone countries, and the DRC issue. East Africa basically is a messed up area, because now Uganda is planning to, there's a general who has said he's also planning to go into the DRC. Uganda, Museveni is planning to invade his side of DRC. So these factors could have played a major role in the decision that was being made there. The fact that South African forces died. And SADC is the one that is in DRC.
And sadly, the current government has sent military forces to fight against the M23. And the issue of a relationship at the East African community definitely is not so good, you know, and has not been right. Kenya with Tanzania, now Kenya with Rwanda, because again, when you go to the Congo territory, you're meeting as opponents, you know.
But I thought the Kenyan forces were pulled back.
Whether they were pulled back, I'm saying they were in there fighting who?
M23. They actually never even fought.
They were supposed to fight M23.
Yes.
Remember? So what I'm trying to say is that these are the kind of things that ate into our relationship with some countries, like Rwanda, like Tanzania, which also has an influence in.
Did DRC vote?
Countries in war were not voting. Countries which are at war were not voting, and that included some which are in West Africa, including Mali. You know,
but DRC was part of the vote list. There are 5 countries, actually 6 countries that were exempted from voting. Was of course Morocco, because they walked out of the African Union. then you have the other 5 countries that have civil strife.
Civil strife,
and Congo is not one of them per se, because the other ones are actually coups, where militaries took over government.
Yes.
So those ones, so they had 48. I think about 48 countries that were cleared to vote. So DRC is part of it.
So DRC,
but if they were there,
DRC definitely voted with SADC.
Of course.
They must have voted with SADC, because
they must
where
have
they
voted
had the
against
inclination,
Raila.
Yes. So that is why I'm saying that there's a lot that played into it. Secondly, the politics of the AUC position, whether it would have been so important to Africans, Kenyans, in terms of economic value, is what we would have been considering. How would it benefit us if Raila Odinga would become the chairman of that committee, the AUC, that commission? Because the commission is not really the summit. There are people who have the perception that is like a president of the African. Is a committee that runs, is like a CEO of a secretariat. Has no say when the shareholders come to sit and talk. And how it would add value to the Kenyan community, save for him being there, was not much. And comparing it to the 13 billion plus that would have been that was actually expended, that would be lost. While we were still talking about the capitation lacking in schools at the moment, and schools are open, definitely some of these things will come into the realization that was it really worth it, and it was not worth it. It was not worth
sending Raila there.
Sending anybody there when we are having these economic upheavals. We needed to put our priorities right. However, we had him in the ballot, which is okay. And having somebody even as in the United Nations, we always say it's a plus in a global platform or a continental platform. That was good, but the value. How would it have benefited us? He was the head of infrastructure. How much did he benefit in terms of infrastructure in Kenya? Because he was leading it in Africa at some point. How much did we benefit with that? Now, when I'm coming back to the politics of
do we? Maybe we look at it differently. Instead of looking at whether Kenya benefited,
benefited.
I'm saying when he was the infrastructure head, whether Kenya benefited, because the AU, this is not an African thing.
Yeah.
Did Africa benefit from him holding that position? I think, if I'm not wrong, I think he did.
It did, and
a bit of it with this African bank, definitely. There were some avenues that were opened up, and certain development took place. Accessibility of funds and resources to the ADB. Of course, it's not been much of a hitch, but at least we saw more and more African countries running for loans from the ADB instead of the IMF and
infrastructure.
So
did Africa benefit from Raila's positioning?
Fred, one of the landmark projects that we have that have been championed by the African Union is the LAPSET project, which begins from the port of Lamu. Fred, I grew up in Mombasa, and I'm telling you, Lamu is something else now because of the scale of kind of project that has been done there. And when you look at the link road that has been worked on towards Isiolo, heading north towards the border with Ethiopia, because that is how it's supposed to go, and the Great Northern Road that goes through Kitale all the way to Lodwar, it's a beautiful road that is part of what you call the road infrastructure that's trying to connect the east and the west. All those are landmark projects that the African Development Bank is funding based on the policies of the African Union in how they want to unite the African. And it's also part of what, including the rail project that Raila Odinga has been speaking of, is in those phases.
Remember the road that connects Lamu to all the way to Cairo was started in the third regime of Mwai Kibaki. So it's not about him being the African development. It was something that has been going on. But our bit is what we call the LAPSAT, the one that covers that road, the corridor, part of the corridor. And that is actually funded by Kenya. But it started in the third regime, 2008, while he was not for the African development. So we have to be discussing Raila Odinga here. Yes. And that's why I came in with that.
No problem.
Raila Odinga's landmark champion that he's been doing at that level when he was the African leader is about the infrastructure and connecting Africa. That has been, when you see funding that comes from the African Development Bank, largely it's that Nigerian guy is ever at the AU. Akiwumi, Dr. Akiwumi is somebody. And really they shape their policies based on what the African Union does, its business. And the infrastructure bit has been very keen as far as connecting Africa and doing business. That's why they even have the free trade area agreements to allow Africans to be able to do business amongst themselves. And so even in terms of policy, Fred, this country will be 100 years from today. Today we can conceive an idea and say this is where Kenya should go in as far as its infrastructure and maybe trade and the ABCD. And then somebody else can come and implement it. When you want to talk about that project, we can't talk about one and exempt the other. You have also contributed, because then you've created a concept that then somebody else can come and put it into play, because that's what development is a continuous process. And so in terms of policy at the African Union level, that is what largely, and I think when you go back and check on some of the things that Raila Odinga has been saying while in that performing role, is part of the infrastructure project. And that's why when they were in China for they were calling the China Belt Movement, the road structure that's supposed to be there. That was largely being pushed by the African Union as well, the funding of the railway system, so that then you're able to move, just like the way in Europe, you can be able to move from one country to the other country via rail, is how they want to achieve in terms of the African rail network. So those are the projects that are done. You see, his role was a policy role. He was not a mason or a plumber that is supposed to be on the road and actually do that. No, you just create the policies and then somebody else can actually go and implement it. So that is it. But Fred, I wanted to say something just very quickly on Museveni. Unknown to many Kenyans is that Museveni is actually a Rwandese.
Museveni
is actually Rwandese and is actually a Tutsi just like Kagame. You understand? These border communities sometimes, and even here in Kenya, sometimes the way we have, here in Salama in Kilimambogo, here you have Kambas that are literally Kikuyus. You go to Meru there, you can't tell whether it's a Njeri or a Makena. Also where I come from, Kakamega, we border all the way from Maseno when you're going up through Wisero to Busia, Fred. There is no pure Luya or a pure Luo in that place. That's why you can hear most of my people, including my relatives in Mumias, they can speak both languages. And he's a pure Luya that I know his great-great-grandfather. I can tell the family tree. None of them is Luo, but by virtue of how you operate at that particular place, you can just adopt a language and be able to do that. So sometimes Museveni operates like Nyankole, which is a border community at the border where they border Rwanda. But him and Kagame are actually Tutsis. And that's why they have mutual interest in what is happening in Eastern Congo, because they want to hive off 3 provinces. North Kivu, South Kivu, and another province there. They want to cut it off from DRC and make it a country, just like Burundi and Rwanda. You understand? So their personal interest is then to be able to is then to be able to hive off that place and make it a country, because the communities that live there are actually largely an ethnic community that is from Rwanda. That's why when he's being accused as to why he's funding them, is because he's basically funding his type of people across the road.
Yes.
You understand?
Yeah.
And so when he's accused to do that, he actually says M23.
They went to settle in southern Kivu. So that's why the government has to ensure that these riches do not go to countries like Rwanda or even Uganda, and that's why DRC Congo has to put its act together and fight for its territory.
What are the geopolitics in terms of the flexing of muscles of the superpowers, the French, the US, in this? Because could that also have played a role in the loss of Raila Odinga?
Absolutely. You see, like now when William Ruto called up the French
president
to support, knowing too well that the French and the Belgians are part of the French president to support, knowing too well that the French and the Belgians are part of the bad history of what we call the General Congo, that is the Congo Brazzaville and the Congo, the other Congo, DRC and Brazzaville. That history has French in it. The Rwanda collapse and the genocide, it has France in it. Until Paul Kagame had to declare that we are now going to become an English-speaking nation, we don't speak French and things like that, and moved away from France. the emancipation of the minds of Africans through the Pan-Africanism process that had taken place, which our President William Ruto was also part of the team that is
at the beginning
currently championing, the current leaderships. At the beginning, he came in as a Pan-Africanist, and they were to champion this, until things didn't go right with the relationships with Kenya and the US, Kenya and Russia at some point, Kenya and China. We are a country that is, in a hodgepodge relationships.
Yes.
So, because we were the three superpowers, we wanted to have them all to us, because we are telling them nice things, and still we are relating with others. I don't use the word that I would use that would really best describe that kind of act, and that is what really has cost us, and even cost the Ruto influence that he had with the African nations. It would have been so easy for President, for Raila Odinga to win the AUC. Had the US trip, which was so hyped and publicized, not have happened, or would not have been so publicized as it did, because it showed like Kenya is now shifting goals in terms of relationships.
You think China, US,
Definitely.
France, the big boys played their game there?
They must have done that.
Yes.
And you see, while they are trying to flee or run away from whatever the colonial mentality, the French colonial mentality, Kenya and other countries which were British are supposed to be running away from fleeing from the British, colonial mentality. That colonial mentality is what the Pan-Africanism was dealing with, which is what Raila Odinga was fostering, even in his campaigns, that Africans must be independent, Africans must discover their potential.
Yes.
It was a very good campaign that he would have won. But the factors that would have led to that, and that's where I would blame the strategists, and I say they did not really broaden their scope and check the Islam factor. Had they checked the Islam factor, that would have played for, well for Raila Odinga.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Ngaire, as we come in, what roles do you think that these big boys played in this?
Fred, there's no doubt that particularly these global developed nations, there's no doubt that they have interest in Africa in many ways. But Fred, I think this is largely the internal interests that have been there at a continental level. When you look at the kind of blunders the way they have said they are Ruto's blunders, that this president continues to make at a global stage. For example, Kenya has no social, political, or economic interest in Haiti, for example. It's a country that there's nothing we can say we are benefiting. When you're completely nothing. But you see 600 now, I think, and 27 or something. I think they took 400, then there's like 221 or 227 that have joined them, so it's about 627, are now in the face of danger for absolutely no reason other than just international optics. You understand? The other countries much closer, including the great US of A, that are next to Haiti, and have unlimited resources to actually take on those rebels from air.
Yes.
You understand? It has nothing to do with us. But this president seems not to have, I would have said no advisors, but until when I went to the Foreign Affairs Office and see how smart people are there, it has nothing to do with lack of advice. I think the president hasn't taken time to listen to technocrats who understand what diplomacy is, because then you make certain decisions based on what the interest of your country is in that particular nation. Countries like Haiti have absolutely no value to us.
We are so far from them.
Way too far. Over 10,000 kilometers away.
If we bring peace in Haiti, okay, it's good. We shall be called the peacemakers, just like God says. But blessed are the peacemakers. But the countries around them have not been able.
But do you think at an almost $21 trillion plus economy like the US wouldn't have done it if they wanted? It's not that they were not able to do it. They just say let other people get busy with that because we have other things to do. And really, that's what Kenyans ought to have said. Let other people get busy with it. We have other things to do here.
Yes.
You understand? So when you look at a situation like that one and look at what happened in Israel, where Gaza has been completely, I saw the destruction of how they blew up that strip. Fred, even rebuilding it. That's why Trump was joking with it, actually saying that place is totally built up, be destroyed. Maybe Egypt and Jordan should consider taking the people to move there. It looked a bit insensitive based on what had happened, but clearly when you look at what has happened, there is not a place where you expect a human being to go back and stay.
True.
And then you have our president openly, endorsing the actions of the Netanyahu and the state of Israel, just like the way we had here with the Gen Z movement, and you had kids gunned on live TV, and then the president says police did a good job. There could be good police officers that were maintaining law and order on that day. They actually probably did a good job. But the context of how you say it could also matter as to how the other party receives it. You understand? A mother whose son's brain has been blown up live on Parliament Road wouldn't take a statement like that one as a joke, friend.
Yes.
You're a parent. You wouldn't want to take such a statement when you know there are kids that have been. So I think the president sometimes he talks too fast, and maybe doesn't take advice, because I really know there are smart people at the Department of Foreign Affairs. They are very, just like a treasury, I always tell you, Fred, there are people there who have gone to Harvard and they've started business. They really know how economies are supposed to work. But they just never, they sat there and they're idle, which is one of the things that's going to be part of our manifestos in the next election, is to be able to ensure that we restructure government, make it lean and efficient, to do away with the idle public servants who just show up in office to get paid for now. Because we have a whole team of what I would call economic superstars at Treasury that have good policies. But then the president has created another economic council at State House who are largely political psychopaths, these and the others, who are also paying a couple of billions to run the similar office. So leaving those who are actually the professionals at Treasury with massive ideas and have a duty to advise the president, because they are paid by taxpayers' money to be able to do that. So I think the challenge with the president is that then he seems not to be able to contain himself in as far as he's looking for international fame. He's looking for international fame on global issues, and I think at one point he even mentioned touched something on Ukraine in one of these international meetings, and I said, my goodness, what is this president, what are we going to benefit in this debate of Ukraine? I think he met the president of Ukraine in one of the functions, and he appeared to show sympathy and trying to rebuke President Putin, and it's not like we like Putin, but some things you just stay away and you go there, get what is there for you, and you get out.
Having come out of a meeting with Putin, with other African leaders.
Imagine, by the way, because Putin had hosted them as well. Yes. And he's in another function and he's there, so anyway.
So his blunders...
Gaira puts it very well, very clear.
So his blunders basically caused this.
Yeah.
Because largely, his blunders actually caused this, because you can see now the looseness of his speech, quick to say something. I think without really considering with others what are the implications, negative implications against this country, and our reputation and our standing internationally. If he sits down with people and gets advised. Because I remember at some point, we were actually heading towards the 2022 elections. I said here that President Ruto is one gentleman who has his own strategy on paper. So anything you say must tally with what he has on paper. So if it doesn't, he still goes ahead with it, whether it's right or not, but he considers himself to have maybe had it right with the people he sat down with. And you see, time also changes perceptions. So whichever way you had seen it, today the reality is advising contrary. Now, these are the kind of things that really cost whatever the president has done. Kenya is globally in touch from the digital platform with the rest of the world. And much of what happens in Kenya, starting with what we had with the Gen Zs and the finance bill, which really took the issues of Kenya to the international media, and so it was heard everywhere. And the negativity of the government in terms of handling that issue, the abductions that have taken place, and many other things, actually are not things that would really endear anyone or anything that is coming from Kenya. Remember, after all this has taken place, then the relationship between Raila Odinga and the president comes in, and I told you how connected we are globally, and then you present him as a candidate. It was It was the local politics trying to be played in the international arena.
Now,
and that is why he had to fail.
If we come back now to the local politics, Raila is now out of the international politics. He's now back home.
Yeah.
Or at least I think in the course of this week there's supposed to be a prayer service at Bomas to receive him back. For Thanksgiving for Raila. So he's now back.
We've already spent 13 billion. I don't know what is this.
So he's coming back. There's going to be that.
Let them sort the capitation thing first. Anyway.
Now, Raila is not going to sit idle as we run towards 2027 election.
Yes.
And I can almost bet, and my bet will be sure, that his name will be on the ballot come 2027.
Fred,
you can almost take it to the bank.
Yeah. Fred, I wanted to give you a different response, but you've altered my response again because initially I wanted to say that he's a Kenyan and he's allowed to run.
Yes, he's allowed to fight.
No Kenyan should be stopped from. It's a constitutional right. He can even come 100 years and still run. That is part of his rights. Now, anyway, I was just going to say that part of his conceding speech was that he's available for other roles at the NAF. I think you had it.
Yes.
And also, I've listened to the person who has won this position. He has indicated that he has tremendous respect for Honorable Odinga as a senior and what he has done already at a continental level. Remember, up until this point, Raila Odinga was the only one who had already worked with the African Union. So he already sort of understands how things run over there. And he said he wouldn't mind him being part of the team. Remember, he's now an employer. The same way the other guy employed Raila. So this one actually can employ him for other roles. You understand? Because he's a chairman. So there's a possibility that he could still have a role at that particular level and be able to just get out of the scene. But you see, as a Kenyan, then he still has a position to come back and continue what he was doing. That's what the ODM party has said. They have said they love him and that they can continue to do. They have a lot to do. Yes. He said he has a lot of things to do when he comes back home. Fred. Unless you keep his diary, you tell us that he's present now. He said, the host himself has said, he has a lot of things to do, and it could be running for that. He's not out of place. He's a politician, and he's a Kenyan, and he's a registered voter. Remember, even if he were to become the chairman of AU, he would still come back in 2027 to vote. They don't take away the voting rights. Yes. But there's no doubt that changes the political dynamics that were here. President William Ruto was in my market when he was in Western the other day, and I happened to be there too. A road that I have now known for 4 decades. 4 decades, Fred.
Yes.
If God is good enough, I'm going to be 40 soon. You understand?
Yes.
And I was born just across the road at the nearby hospital, and my mother confirmed to ask her, what happened when I was born? He said, we went like this to the home. So I can confirm I've been on that road for 40
Your mom used to that.
Yeah, she said.
When she was going to give birth to you.
Yeah, because, I'm a December child. My mother had gone to the village to visit his mom. Yeah. And then he told me, son, you were born here. And when you were born, luckily my grandmother was a nurse. So she was at the hospital. So she said, when you were born, we went through this road.
Yes.
So I can confirm I've been on that road for 4 decades almost. So Fred, the president was there and he was telling us again how he was going to bring a contractor to make that road tarmac. The same old story that almost 3 other presidents have done. You understand, Fred? And the reaction after the president left was very clear. That Kenyans have other plans. You understand? They already know now the kind of politicians they are dealing with. These are not strangers. They've been here for a very long time. So Raila Odinga and others can plan, and it's a constitutional right. One thing that I always say, Fred, and now we have said this for very many years, is that no Kenyan makes a mistake by going to the ballot to choose a leader of his own choice.
Yes.
That is his democratic right. Sometimes, and that is where I always part ways with sometimes the people that I've worked with and supported for over the years in terms of politics, because why should I go and attack him for voting how he voted, and yet I also turned up in a polling station and chose someone? You understand?
Yes.
That means you're saying I also deserve a beating. If I have gone to beat somebody else or attacked him for choosing his democratic choice, and then it means I deserve that kind of beating. So I don't know. Raila Odinga has a chance for him to run. He's a party leader. Kenya has 83. The registered political parties the other day said we have 83 registered political parties, and all of them are free to field presidential candidates. I'm hoping they do. You understand? So that
how does his participation in the local politics now change the matrix?
Yeah, just before he comes in, I lost that point.
Yes.
I was going to say that the reason why I talked of William Ruto is that he was hoping that then the victory of Raila Odinga would be a winning parade. And Fred, like I've told you, that one strip when you get to Kisumu is what cuts through Luoland and Luyaland and all the way to Kisiland. It's a one long trip that you can just walk around shaking hands and you'll have talked to almost all the communities because the suburbs are in the mountain there. You go through the Bukusus, you come into Kakamega, our people, into Luoland, into Kisi, to where couriers are at the border. And that is what makes the western communities that live there. That parade would have sealed, I'm assuming from the president's tactic, would have endorsed him as the person that deserves to inherit the best from Raila Odinga. But then now that changes and he has to go back to the drawing board and replan.
I can confirm to you as a political strategist that the plan to visit Nyanza was actually supposed to begin today, Monday. That Raila Odinga had to be paraded to, if he won, had to be paraded to where his voting bloc is, the support that he gets from Western Kenya all the way to Migori. That would have taken place, it would have been another 1 week in Western Kenya with the president, so that he can be endorsed by the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. Now, this is what is going to play against him this time round. One, remember, there is that court declaration.
Court declaration saying what?
Yes, saying that ODM are the majority. And you see, the court goes by what is presented to them by the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties.
Absolutely.
Now, if they had coalitions and relationships with the independent members of parliament, and they never presented their pact to the registrar, then it doesn't count. So you can imagine they were around 28 seats, which claim to, which ought or claim to be supporting you. There was this other lot that came from the UDM party, and there is this loss of the 44 who voted against the impeachment of Rigathi Gachagua. They are not going to be so friendly to him when it comes to the politics until 2027. So definitely, it is William Ruto with his 150 parliamentarians, 50-something parliamentarians minus 44. Then gamble with the others. And Azimio has its members of parliament intact. Because the only person who was pulled out is Martha Karua, officially. And I think she could have brought only, I think, one member of parliament or two or something with Kenya.
None, actually.
None. There was none. So there's no loss, which means it's Jubilee and these other ODM and Wiper, So taking over parliament would definitely be Raila Odinga's bargain power. So what he's going to do is ensure that they take over parliament using that declaration. So once they take over, it means Moses Wetangula will be displaced. Kimani Ichung'wah will be displaced. Ndindi Nyoro will be displaced. Kuria will be displaced. All those chairmen that are in those influential positions will be displaced. And that means that a new speaker will come in. And of course, will not be Gladys Bosch-Sholei. She'll be a deputy if she remains. Because the one who's supposed to take up the position of a speaker would be from the Azimio. Okay? So once they take over parliament, the House of Impeachment, give it a pause. It means that Raila Odinga and his team, his brigade, might begin to plan for even an impeachment, but that will have been after really troubling the government, the ruling government,
that will come probably
this
2026,
no.
2027.
No. The takeover is not going beyond June or May. The takeover debate about parliament, that one, the tussle is going to pull all the way until May. But the issue of enlarging their share their cake in the government to a 50-50 thing. That means the deputy president is also at stake position because he is an appointee of the president. Ruto cannot risk with an appointee, his own appointee.
So he's going to
because
impeach.
He knows
he's going to impeach Kindiki.
From where Kindiki,
I don't think
from
that's
where,
going to
listen,
happen.
from where Kindiki comes from, which is Mount Kenya, is not in Ruto's control. So definitely he has no loss losing Kindiki and have somebody who is a favorite of Azimio. So he has nothing to lose.
Yes.
You know. So definitely he will try to gamble with these positions that I've mentioned, and these are the political. So the Kindiki factor will come in when they, after taking over parliament. Strategy number 2 is 50-50 share. 50-50 share. Now, when you have your kin next to the state house, impeachment means it is the next guy who inherits. So impeachment comes in.
You know, Fred,
it's a part of strategy.
Very quickly, if in the event that, remember the speaker has defaulted on the court judgment and gave a different decision openly, committing in contempt clearly of the courts. You understand? But I wanted to say about what it means then with the declaration that Azimio now is majority, is then the chairmanship of the technical committees like the budget committee and those committees, House Business Committee, then change, and also the numbers that you're given as a majority party leader in a committee usually exceed what the minorities get in terms of position. So if it's 9 members in a committee, for example, then you get 5. That means then you can 6-5. You can then outvote the decisions of the committee in almost in everything. You understand? Because then you can put more members on that particular panel. So it changes the way Parliament does its business. So what you should ask yourself that now that William Ruto has lost the bait that you're supposed to go with in the areas where now is looking for support, is then what best can he offer ODM? That's what you should ask yourself. If the bromance is to continue, right? They said now we're still working together. So what are you putting on the table? That's why ODM had moved its PG to this week. They said let's see and watch the outcome of what happens. And then they see. Fred, I know a lot of ODM members of parliament that I've talked to and I was at home, is that there were no, like Caleb Amisi literally is my neighbor. And he's also my friend. We are age mates. He was telling me we're just waiting for the outcome of AU and we part ways with this president. Because even selling the president, maybe, you can sell the president in Baringo, in Elgeyo Marakwet. But in the areas where you have to, you either have a made-up mind voter, maybe because he's from your tribe or he's your friend, but the other one, there has to be a reason as to why I'm voting for you. You understand? So those are voters who are open-minded. So to go and sell them this government with the issues we have with Adani and the issues of the education, the new funding model of the education, children are stuck at home, all those issues, it's very hard. So you have to really be against government to be appealing in certain regions. For their local politics now, leave alone the national. Locally, to win their own seats, for their own seats, you can't go there with the issue of SHA. Let me tell you, the issue of SHA, the issue of the new funding model, is very emotive because those are the issues that parents live on every day. The health of your kids, the education of your kids, and food. The issues that you can't escape. You can escape other issues. But you have a kid that has worked very hard, she's qualified to go to the university, but you still have a bill of 100, 200, 300,000 to pay. How do you escape that? So, and most of these MPs, their biggest role is the issue of education and the bursaries and stuff. So you can't go and sell this president in those regions. So they were hoping just the outcome of what happens this weekend, and then they move on. Because you understand. So, and even Baba himself is aware. He's aware that his dalliance with this president has costed the credibility of the party that he leads, because he's an opposition party that has largely been appearing to be pro-people for years. You understand? And so when you have a pro-people issue like that one of the health insurance and the education funding model that directly affects the young people, you can't be in the opposite side of that kind of a thing. You understand? But they had to endure this relationship to get us to a point that we got yesterday on Saturday. You understand? Now that it's gone,
it's all guns blazing. and I think the person who will win the next election, will have a very easy, a very easy platform in the sense that all you need to say is I will change the education model. I will take it back to where the government was paying school fees for university students.
In fact,
as in it's
we've
on a silver plate.
Fred, me have actually, we've blended it as death and funeral announcement. That on 10th of August, this is what we are burying.
Yes.
That we are burying Shah, we are burying the new funding. You don't need a manifesto for that.
Yes.
You see,
it's such an unpopular thing.
the tricky part with Raila Odinga coming back to the Kenyan politics is that now he understands how much he's expected to put in cleansing the William Ruto regime, you know, because the same Kenyans you want to sell these ideas to, or the personality of William Ruto and also his government, the type of government that he has today, killings take place simply because of objecting the finance bill. Then all of a sudden, you agree with them. You bring in Adani, Kenyans complain, all of a sudden, you declare you are wrong. They are right. You bring in the Shah, Shif, whatever, it comes in, not working, not even understandable. It's an incognito thing that has been introduced to the people. No one understands it. Now, Azimio may not have that energy to come and do the explanation of this esoteric thing called the Shif, Shah, health, whatever. Yet, it was just a matter of investing a little, injecting a little support, financial support, and all logistics that would be respective to bolstering the performance of the then NHIF. You know, you introduce the new model that was supposed to, you know, do some bit of profiling. That I look at Ngaira and Mureithi looks, you know, bigger, fatter, whatever. So Ngaira could be poorer than Mureithi in the perception of Africans, you know. So wacha tupatie Ngaira 50,000 yet Mureithi ana chakula kwake. Tupatie mtoto wa Ngaira 50,000 na mimi nipate 10,000. You know, it was a very foolish mentality that was not supposed to be applied by, you know, intellects. I would have expected something different because when you say that the number of cows I had or the school I went to means something today, I could be in a position to do that yesterday. Ask the people who are struck by the corona effects. They will tell you today life is no longer the way it used to be then. So if I had my child in international school and today I have him in government school, and that child completed his primary in international school, and then you come to judge that my child is coming from an affluent, you know, family. I think that is the worst way of doing this calculation. But you see, scientific analysis, even in politics, they fail. It's like the same way somebody would go for opinion polls. Opinion polls speak to 2,000 people, representing 50 million opinions. How does it work for you? I mean, go to the ground, then you'll get to know which side agrees with you and which doesn't. So as selling the government, the government of the day, with the kind of relationship that they would have, unless they're given 50-50, to secure them in the planning of the 2027 election. To have a hand in the planning of the 2027 election. That is the only thing they know as Azimio that would suppress the force that is coming in as opposition in the likes of Rigathi Gachagua and the other guys who are joining.
Your closing comment.
This president has too many opponents. You know, he has Gen Zs that were blatantly gunned down on live on international TV, and they're angry up to this date. He has fallen out with the church. He has fallen out with the mountain. He has now mismanaged the economy. That's why the prices are still very high. And he has loaded on hard-working civil servants who are working on small salaries with something called the Housing Levy Fund, that 950,000 civil servants can't wait for it to be undone. You understand? They are in government. They're supposed to serve.
So they will vote against it to have it.
You understand? Even more worse, Fred. We have 109,000 police officers in the country, and only 9,000 of them are in those high rankings of OCPD, OCS. You understand? But majority of the other 100,000 are what you call field officers, they receive very little salary. When you panel them again with something called housing levy fund, those junior police officers go to the ground completely in as far as their income is concerned. There is opponents today. They might not be directly be opponents as civil servants, but at a personal level, they are hurt by this particular regime. So this president has a lot of undoing to do, a lot of work to do to undo what is already done.
Yes.
But it might be too late because, Fred, we are already facing into the next. Anybody that wants to be president now should be ready. And so this president might take long to be able to undo that. So he has to really, what Mrede is saying, is that then he needs to incorporate in these bromance, like I've said, his biggest task now, and I think he should be working on it, is what do I offer ODM in an alternative to retain them inside here so that I can be able to plan for the next election. But without ODM, he might not even make it to that 207, to 2027, sorry.
All right. I'm told we've really gone past time. Thank you, gentlemen. That was very insightful. I hope you've learned something out of this. And trust me, we'll be coming and telling you, we said this was going to happen. It has happened. We said this was going to happen. It has happened. Right now, whosoever is planning for the presidency, including Gaira here, in 2027, has a lot of fodder.
Too much.
Yeah, too much fodder against the current regime, because so many things have failed, and the citizenry is deeply distressed by the things that have failed and the things that have been loaded to them. And all they want to do is unload them off themselves. And unfortunately, they see Ruto as, tied at the hip with whatever is on there. So he has a big, big job to do. Let's see how it plays out. God is the one who helps this country. So do have yourself a lovely morning. Remember, at around 11:30, you're going to have Gatuzi looking at the counties, how they are being affected. And then at 2 p.m., we'll have the scoreboard. I don't know, Manchester United, Arsenal, I don't know which team. I've seen Gor Mahia saying they are almost reclaiming their seat. Let's see how that goes. Do have yourself a lovely morning.